Hello and welcome to Texture Talk, the podcast where we dig into the gritty side of indoor climbing, from climbing gym startup and operations, wall design and textures, to budgeting, gear, setting, gym culture, and more. We cover what really matters, whether you're building or running a climbing gym. Real talk with industry pros, real stories, real texture. Today on episode 2, we're going to be talking about beyond the square foot, understanding climbing wall quotes and bids. Today, I have the privilege of having Mr. Gavin Heverly on with us today. A little bit about Gavin. He's a climbing industry veteran with over 20 years of experience spanning gym management, coaching, marketing, and operational strategy. As the founder of Rise Above Consulting, he has helped dozens of indoor climbing gyms across the U.S. and abroad improve performance, reduce churn, and align team culture with growth. He has developed the Cover Score in partnership with Beta to help gyms evaluate revenue per visitor hour and track key performance indicators in real time. Gavin brings clarity, structure, and industry insight to gym owners looking to launch or scale responsibly. Gavin, welcome to Texture Talk.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the intro. It's psyched to be here. Always psyched to be working with you and collaborating.
Yeah, man, been a fun couple of years together. So
yeah,
excited to have you here and talk about, what the thing that I talk about like every day is climbing wall quotes.
Yeah,
you've got a little experience with that for sure.
Yep.
And you've heard me get on my soapbox about the per square foot price and why I don't like it, but it's a necessary evil in some situations. And so today we're going to cover a little bit of that. We've got some tools we'll look at, but kind of what's included and what's not included in those numbers. Is the budgeting based on real world factors like design and logistics and building conditions? And how do you compare these things apples to apples when you're looking at multiple vendors? Lead times, is that important? And probably yes. We'll get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of, you and I have talked about this at great lengths, and I think it's just good for people to have other resources, just good information, and know that some tools are out there. So I'll quickly share a couple things on the screen here. This is a couple of tools. This one specifically is one that you and I worked on when you and your partner Pete did your climbing gym startup boot camp. I believe that was in Chattanooga earlier this year.
Yeah, that's right.
So kind of some base things for, before we analyze actual bids and what's typically in them and what's not. It's good to get some background on, when should you be talking to builders? And you've got a lot of clients you have this conversation with. And, this is a tool that you and I kind of put together kind of on that subject matter. And if anybody wants a copy of this or any of the other tools, hit us up and we'll send them over to you. But it just kind of goes through the base things you guys should be thinking about when you're engaging climbing wall builders. So, Gavin, when do you typically tell your clients to engage with the builder?
I mean, I think generally earlier is better. Certainly in my interactions with you and with some of the other wall builders as well, people are generally happy to take a call. Do you know what I mean? Like, even if that call's 15 minutes and you're just trying to get an understanding of the project, I think just about any wall builder is going to say earlier is better than later, And so even if you get on a call, it's like, it doesn't quite sound like you're ready yet, but here's some stuff you should be thinking about. I mean, I think you and I just had that call with one of my clients last week. So, those calls are helpful. So I would say earlier is better. And I think it's relevant to the bid portion, which is really what we're going to be talking about today, right? Which is like, when does a bid matter? Because too early on and like a bid isn't even going to be real. And I've dealt with clients who come to me and like, they haven't even selected their building yet. And they're telling me they've got a bid from a wall builder. And I'm like, how's that possible? Like, I don't understand how you have a bid from a wall builder. And they're like, well, I told him, I'm going to be trying to find a building that's 20,000 square feet. And so they told me they can build climbing walls for X thousands of dollars. And I'm like, I'll tell you that number's not real. On the flip side of that, from my end, And for the work that I do with some of these folks, I'm really helping with feasibility, right? I'm really helping with financial modeling and business planning. And there's this tension early on that every aspiring gym owner, or even just somebody that's looking to scale and build their next one, number 2 or number 10 or whatever, of like, you have to push a bunch of stuff forward. You have to push on real estate and funding and financial modeling and all of that stuff without any of it being real yet. And it's a tough space to operate in. So one of the reasons that I do like to talk early with wall builders, and by the way, much to your chagrin, part of why the per square footage number, even if it's total lick your finger and put it in the wind, is helpful, is because it helps with the financial modeling side of it, right? If I can just get a number for my clients that's within 20% accuracy of like what a climbing wall is likely to cost, and if I can do it based on a very easily adjustable factor, right? Of like, well, how much square footage of flooring or climbing or whatever is it going to be? It makes the financial modeling aspect better. So I think that's why you're constantly getting, the screws put to you to come up with a PSF number, even though we all know that that number is like sort of hogwash. So that's sort of like my side of like when to engage and why do we do it and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, and again, necessary evil, and if I'm going to go build a gym, I have to start somewhere with a number for that line item and that in
Yeah,
the business
yeah,
plan. And
yeah,
I get it. I think we've probably combined worked on maybe I don't know 500 or 600 business plans in this space, so totally
yeah,
get it.
yep,
But really, it's what is in the square foot quote, right? And
yep,
so I've got up on the screen here. Typically, you got your climbing wall panels, support structure, layout and design work. You've got some logistics for shipping and crews and rentals and things like that, and then the
yeah,
installation. Those are kind of just high level. There's more. We'll dig into a little bit more of those, but not included. Typically, a site access for equipment is listed here. I've
yep.
been on a number of builds that whether it's below grade and you can't get
Mm,
the lift in there, and now you have
hmm.
to build up scaffolding, or it's on a second level and you have to hand carry everything off the truck, which always makes the crews really happy to start. But sometimes that
Yeah,
limits the size of piece of steel or panel that you have to create to get through the certain doorway. And so there's a lot of those things you have to pay attention to.
yeah,
Um, you know, Fireproofing, depending on the state you're in. If you attach to a building, make sure that the builder is or is not covering the refireproofing of penetrations. Is that in the per square foot? Probably not.
hmm
um,
hmm
so waste removal, you have to have trash receptacles and things like that for waste. And so there's all those things that are not included that at the end of the day, you still have to provide for that are probably not carried in that per square foot price. And the list is really long. We'll get into some of that. Material price fluctuation, make sure you're locked that in your contract, like things like that. So, your $80 a square foot doesn't go to 85, and because of a clause in that contract that says they're not responsible, or at least know that clause is in there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
um,
Where does, can I ask, where does like site mobilization fit in here? Is that part of what would be included in square footage, or is that more like not included? That's like a separate fee.
that should be, I mean, wall companies do things differently.
Sure,
They're
yeah,
not all the same. I mean, I know when I price something, that mobilization is included, the initial
yeah.
mobilization. Now, we'll get into some other pieces like a demob and remob type of things where things
Right.
happen and,
You got
and
to
all
leave the
that good
site for
stuff.
2 months and come back, whatever. Yeah,
That is not included, right? And
yeah.
and so that does happen on certain projects if they're not coordinated carefully.
Hmm.
Also, things like water and heat and electricity and a restroom uh, are to be provided. At least
Yeah.
I mandate that so that we've got light and ambient heat, so
Hmm.
it's comfortable working, and the crew can use a restroom.
Yeah.
So
The other
that
thing that actually I'm realizing, and it's funny because we put this deck together and I'm seeing something that's not on here, is sort of like the change order aspect of it,
yeah
right?
yeah
And there's this, and I know you're going to talk a little bit about like some of the things that make life easier and harder. I've been designing and building gyms for years, and I've run into, oh, we didn't know that sprinkler head was there, or we didn't know that HVAC duct was there, or whatever it is. So now we've got to change in real time,
Yep.
while we're on the site, and that takes an extra day or whatever it is to move something around.
Yeah, that's a game that a lot of wall companies do play.
Yeah,
So if and I've created a little cheat sheet which I'll share later, kind of cover some
yeah,
of that stuff. But it's if it's an existing facility, do a site visit. And if they're not willing to do a site visit, have them have if they have a full set of drawings, architectural, structural, and mechanical. You can have your client field verify elevations and things like that if they're capable of doing so,
yeah,
or their general contractor, which is always good. But I would have something written in if I was buying the walls that you understand that the heights of the building and the as-built conditions are as such, and so you're not going to have, if that does happen, the onus would be on the wall manufacturer.
yeah,
I know
yeah,
when it's an existing building, I 100% of the time do a site visit, not 99, 100, because
yeah,
maybe there's a fire extinguisher that you can't see that you just put a wall over and the fire marshal is going to come in and say, tear down the wall. That doesn't work, right? So
yeah.
you need to be really smart and careful with that. There's an as-built condition I saw in a building a couple weeks ago. It's a foot taller up front than it is in the back, and that is not in the
Mm.
building drawing. So for whatever reason, the architectural drawings do not show
Your
that.
clear height at the top, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
So I was like, huh, that's interesting. Glad I'm here. So
Well, and one of the things that I talk to my clients about a lot when they're sort of vetting spaces, they'll talk to realtors and brokers or developers or whatever, and they're really focused on ceiling height. And I'm constantly telling them, no, 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 no. Ask about clear height. Ceiling height's irrelevant because you can get a space that's 30 feet tall and the clear height's 22 because you got a bunch of HVAC units hanging from the ceiling or sprinkler systems or whatever it is. You want to know what your actual clear space is from the ground.
yeah. For those that aren't familiar, that's really from your grade or ground to the bottom of roof structure or mechanical structure or plumbing structures. So you have to understand what those elevations are.
Yep.
So it's really, really important.
Yep.
As you start to get into like talking to vendors, obviously you talk to them about features, benefits of the systems, things like that. But you start to look at, the types of panels that they use, the support structures they use. Key considerations definitely are how fast it goes together on site. Craftsmanship, always probably number one, how fast it goes together on site. Density of T-nuts. I think everybody's flirting in that 4 inch per square foot range now for the most part. How they actually attach to your building is really important, especially if you're leasing and you cannot attach to the walls. Is that in there per square foot to make it freestanding? Don't know, right? So things to think about. Do you get a set of stamp drawings from your climbing wall provider, or is the onus on you to get the stamp set of drawings? I've seen companies do both. I know we
Yeah.
provide them, but I also know that
How
other
much of
folks.
a hassle does that end up being for the wall manufacturer to try and deal with a structural engineer that's maybe more used to, a building, versus climbing walls, which are certainly probably lighter loads than some of the buildings, but very different as far as how it's loaded and all of that stuff. I'm not technical enough to understand it. That's why I'm not an engineer. But like, how much of a hassle can that be if the manufacturer is not providing a structural engineer to do stamp drawings and you got to go find that person?
Yeah, that's a learning curve.
For
That's an
sure.
op
Yeah.
that's an opportunity to learn and be creative. So yeah, if you have to go find your own engineer, um, maybe call CWA and get a referral or a
Mm-hmm.
recommendation might be a good
Yeah.
idea. Call another wall builder that does provide engineering
Yeah.
and ask if they can outsource or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's really good if you have an engineer that knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because I found in almost every project, so like if we go into an existing building, we always have the engineer of record for that building sign off on our math. We own the math and the engineering, but we want to make sure that our owner is protected.
Yeah.
So
And what are they basically signing off on, like the attachments, basically?
yeah, we approve on how you're attaching and we think the loads are fine and you're not going to
Yep.
bear down on the roof or the wall or what have
Yep.
you, depending on the condition. So we have them sign off, but it's really good. I always have our engineer speak to the building engineer.
Yep.
And I sit on the call and take whatever notes I need to,
Yep.
but they speak
Let the nerds
engineering
nerd it.
and they do a great job and the
Yep.
problems go away. because it's
Yeah.
all really relatively simple if they know what they're doing. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe reach out to CWA. That's a learning curve. There
Yep.
are some wonderful engineering firms that can figure it out, but that's going to cost you time and money
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
So
And the
good
reason I
talk.
brought that up is when I was running a bunch of gyms on the East Coast, and there was a period of time, there was some big injury that happened on some artificial climbing wall at like a circus or something like that in Massachusetts. And Massachusetts basically created a law that I don't know if it's changed since then, where all climbing walls now are an amusement and have to be inspected annually. And these people that show up that are like amusement inspectors have literally never been inside a climbing gym in their life. And they were like asking to go behind the wall and like look at it. They didn't know what they were looking at, you know? And I just remember how much of a hassle that was, because it's like you've got somebody that inspects like ropes courses and literally like Ferris wheels and stuff like that. And they're like, coming into a climbing gym and being like, what am I looking at? It's like, I don't know. I'm not an engineer either, dude.
Yeah, yeah. I remember a project we did in West Virginia, and same thing there. They treat climbing walls as amusement, and the
Yeah.
inspector came out and they brought a lift out for him, and he was lifted to the top of the wall and looked around, and this is one of like 10 walls, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Yep, looks good." I was like, "Gotta love it."
Okay.
Okay.
Checking the
Uh,
box.
yeah. So again, we like to sleep at night. We do provide those
Yeah.
engineering plans. That really does help you sleep at night as well.
Yep.
And all that. I mentioned this a bit ago. Ground up versus existing. If you've got an existing facility, there's a lot more complexity in that climbing wall bid that needs to be thought about. To our points about clear heights and proper drawings and building heights and elevation, as-built conditions, all of these things. So, yeah, it's a different animal. Ground up is you control it. You control your destiny. You
Yeah.
can kind of tick your boxes, but it does take a lot longer typically and cost a heck of a lot more. But at least you're building something that you know how it's going to turn out,
Yeah.
right?
And just as a real world example from my side, I've got a client that we're looking at a lease opportunity. Just so happens in the area that they're looking, they've got one building that's amazing as a lease and another opportunity on a building to buy. That's also great. They're great locations. They're like similar in size. They sort of, check a bunch of the boxes. And then he's got an opportunity for a ground up build as well that's also in a great location and the price is right and on and on. And the difference right now between ground up is like the difference between, I think right now we're modeling about $1.2 million versus 4.7 million.
There you go.
So it is a big, big difference.
Yeah.
And I mean, you get a lot of benefit from that. You now own real estate. You've now got a building that is yours. You're not dealing with landlords. You've got an asset that can be used to leverage in the future for debt financing if you want to scale, blah, blah, blah. A lot of advantage, but you're right. It's 3 to 5 times more. It is a big upfront cost, and people really need to be prepared for what that looks like.
Yeah, and at that point, it's not so much of a climbing gym. Ultimately, it's a commercial development, right? And so
100%. Yeah, you're becoming, a property manager, all of those things. So it's a different beast. But on the flip side of that, depending, the building can end up being worth more in, 10 years than the operating business inside of it. So,
right.
There's pluses and minuses whichever direction you go. But the thing that I would impress upon people that are watching is like, if you're thinking about doing ground up, it really is a lot more expensive, and you really just have to think about, am I up for that? Can I raise that kind of money, et cetera, et cetera. It's a big difference if you need to go bring 20 or 30% into loans. There's a big difference between 20% on 1 million and 20% on 5 million.
Yeah, heck yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no doubt, no doubt. And you get to learn about wastewater retention and improved
Yeah.
ground, and
Yeah.
you get a minor in civil engineering and all this stuff that comes along with it. So yes,
That's right. Yeah.
it is a process. Um, so just a quick hitter on ground up and versus existing. Again, we'll send this to anybody that wants a copy, but
Yeah.
there's just kind of quick bullet points and thoughts, and we can happy to have calls and talk about more, but some good things to think about here as you go down through the project. Um, Kind of project timeline start to finish. I'm talking real actual time. There might be greater amounts of time in between these spans,
Yeah.
But typically, like when your initial engagement, maybe it's an hour-long call, maybe you do 2D layouts, you do some pricing, that's a couple of weeks. Maybe that gets into 3D modeling. Formal pricing is always good. Keep checking the bids and pricing as you're going along.
Yeah.
2-3 weeks there in terms of real time. Engineering, 1 to 3 weeks. Manufacturing, good rule of thumb is 1,000 square feet per week. Most manufacturers kind of hold that line. Pretty good. Installation typically follows 1,000 square feet per week. I know we're on a quicker pace than that, but good rule of thumb is you're budgeting out your timeline. So
Yeah.
kind of figuring out how long is this project going to take from the climbing wall perspective, and then the tenant improvement perspective, and how long am I paying rent that I'm not open potentially. So those are good numbers for those things. Builders do book out there, whether you can go to CWA and there's a pretty exhaustive list of builders, and CBJ, that type of thing. There's really, I don't know, 5 to 10 that are active. And though they book out, like these projects are not small typically. So year and a half is not uncommon. So maybe to Gavin's point earlier, your point is maybe get a hold of them on the early side and understand what their constraints are. So what's in a wall quote? Right? So things to look at as you're talking to climbing wall providers, and I invite you to talk to several and get a feel for who they are as a company and the people. You end up spending a lot of time with them, so make sure that you get along with whoever the representative is, because you do end up spending a lot of time. You get to know people really well in this industry because it's a long sales cycle. But as you're starting to get bids, they're typically going to have a page in their bid that says exclusions, things that are not included in that per square foot value. And I've listed here just a sample of things, and you want to review those. They could be serious cost drivers, or it could be, oh man, I just drove the forklift through the wall next to the climbing wall. Like right here, protection of building finishes, entryway tile, adjacent walls, things like that. So basically, if we screw up, we're not responsible. Good builders will be responsible for what they do. But you want to pay attention to this. Special inspections, really pay attention to this. If anchors have to be inspected, if any building penetrations have to be inspected, pre, post, otherwise, these things can add days and weeks to your project because the inspectors might not be available in the timeline that correlates with when these things happen. So if you've got a climbing wall crew sitting in a hotel room or an Airbnb for a week waiting for an inspection, you're paying for that. So, and good builders will talk you through a lot of these things to look out for on the front side, and communicate with your general contractor about our processes to ensure that the general contractor, who's ultimately responsible for this stuff, understands how things go. They can schedule these things ahead of time. They know what's needed, that type of thing.
And I think like part of where this becomes so important, and I really tried to impress this upon my clients, if you're not buying a building or doing a ground up build, if you're leasing a building, this is probably the biggest check you're going to write. Probably. Maybe your general contractor, depending on the state of the building that you're leasing or whatever, and how much tenant improvement allowance you're getting from the landlord, like maybe your sort of GC build out will be bigger. But I mean, this is certainly in the top 2 checks that you're going to write is with the climbing wall manufacturer. And, you've got whatever, probably 10 bullets or something on here. And like these 10 bullets could be 6 figures easy.
Right.
Like no problem. Right. So, paying attention to this stuff that you're outlining, I think is really, really important, because it can be the difference between another, $100,000, $200,000, depending on the size and scope of the project that you're building.
Yeah, I mean they're in here for a reason, and it's hard for climbing wall companies to know everything that's needed in every place that they build. So a great example is permits and any required licenses, contractors' licenses, specialty contract. So you can get climbing wall bid for somebody for a project in California. That's great, but are they licensed? Because you have to have a specific license in the state of California to build there. So there's things you have to ask your climbing wall provider, and or be prepared to say, I know we need this special license. I know you don't have it, and how do you think we should go about it? That type of thing. So is that in the per square foot price? There's not a chance, right? And so if that adds $5,000 of just straight cost, that's going to be on the owner to figure out, right? So, to your point, these things can add up quickly and really derail projects. So we want to pay really close attention. The good companies will go through all their exclusions to make sure you understand that,
Yep.
as the climbing gym owner. And it's always a good idea to go through the exclusions with the owner's general contractor.
Yep.
So we can try to help protect folks on the front and back side of this thing.
The one thing I don't see on here that is less about like an actual cost that would show up in an invoice, but is more like a delay, is making sure that it's coordinated well with the GC as well. Whoever your like just GC is that's, building your mezzanine and has subcontractors doing electrical and stuff. I've personally experienced and have had clients experience significant delays in the climbing wall portion of the build because the electricians are behind schedule, and you can't put a climbing wall up, in front of the wall that the electricians need to access to, pull, cable or whatever it is, right? There's any number of general construction coordination things that, again, may not necessarily show up in an invoice from a climbing wall manufacturer. But if that coordination is off, it can slow down the whole project, which, to your point, if you've got, 6 people sitting in an Airbnb somewhere waiting for the, plumbing inspection to get finished or whatever, like, it can really screw things up. So I think that's probably another consideration as well. And I think in my experience anyways, I'd be interested in your take, but in my experience, the more coordination there is directly between the climbing wall manufacturer and the GC, the better.
100%. Like, that is absolutely crucial to the project. And I kind of have that as that it's in there, but maybe I should spell it out better. Additional installation time due to building and equipment access.
Yeah.
So if anything's in the way of the climbing wall builder that's not planned for, the owner's going to have to pay for, the per diems and the heads and beds and lifts and all the rentals, the car rentals, like all of that good stuff, right? So we want to coordinate that early and often. So I always ask for a meeting. I do weekly meetings with my contracted work.
Yep.
And whether it's 5 minutes or an hour, it is what it needs to be. But we talk about schedule and we talk about budgets like every time. And I always ask early on once they have their GC set. And sometimes I'm on board before the GC is. But always ask to have the call with the GC to go over their schedule so we can see how we can work in unison. So, okay, you're doing this first, these finishes. Okay, great. Here's what we do first, and then here's where we can come in and maybe work that way around you. We can just work around each other.
Yeah.
So it's not one or the other, and try to coordinate those efforts in order.
And I think that's more of what I was getting at as well, is it may not necessarily be physical access, like something is blocking. It could just be like a coordination block, right? Where it's like, well, the plumbers aren't done yet, or the inspection of the electrical isn't completed or whatever. So, it's like there can just be coordination issues that will hang things up.
Yeah. And it's always really good to have those conversations. I had a call almost 2 years ago now where I asked to have the general contractor on, and I said, okay, we ready to review your schedule? And he's like, well, we don't have one yet. I was like, well, aren't you supposed to be in the field in like a month? He's like, yeah. Still working on that. I said, okay, well, let's hang tight on the call until you have that. Called the owner back. I said, fire that general contractor immediately. They're going to cost you a ton of time and money. And they didn't. And guess what it did?
Yeah. Cost them a ton of time and money. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So hire a good GC. Just side note. That's super good. All right. So you're going to get, you'll get bids, and they'll come in all different shapes and sizes, and hopefully they're based on a common layout. A really tough thing is, as you call around.
Say more about what you mean. Like when you say common layout, like what does that mean?
Yeah. So if you have a building already, or you're close on a building, you're like, hey, how much?
I've got 2 buildings I'm looking at, whatever it is. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Have an idea on, and maybe you need to go out and pay for these services, but have someone at least do a 2D design with some heights.
Yep.
And give that information to the wall builders, because there's lots of ways to play with that per square foot value, and people model in different ways and do different things. But if they're all basing it off of a similar layout, you've got a better chance to have an apples to apples quote.
What level of detail would you say needs to be in that Meaning like, okay, if we're saying, okay, all the rope walls are going to be 40 feet tall, I don't whatever, right? Angle matters to some degree, right? Because like a 40-foot tall straight wall is a different amount of square footage than a 40-foot tall wall at 35 degrees, right?
Y- yes and no.
Okay.
Again, people do modeling different ways. Some people will put an articulation factor on that 35-degree wall.
Yep.
So that kind of compounds the square footage. And really what that's making up for is it takes longer to build that overhanging wall and maybe a touch more steel
Yeah.
to support it. So they're making up for that in a number. Um, be careful of that a little bit.
Okay.
So if you're just looking for a budgetary number, heights and linear runs. So
Okay.
say you've got a boulder that has 45 linear feet at 14 tall to start. These things will change, right? But at least everybody's coming out of the gate with, okay, for us to
Working in the
build
same
that
box.
wall, right? We know articulation can move and all that, and it should, but at least they're coming straight out of the gate, and they'll call it this whatever square foot they're going to call it, and they'll give you a price on it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
ultimately, how much is it going to cost in real dollars to build this thing?
Yeah.
They can call it whatever square foot value they want, but how much in real dollars does it cost? And if you're doing that, at least you're knowing you've got competitive bids. Because there are situations where, and you and I have spoken about a few, but a few weeks ago, I did a layout or based on a layout that they provided this client, and I got 3,200 square feet of climbing wall. He said the other group that they were talking to said the same layout was 6,000 square feet of climbing wall. So I said, okay, well, that's fine. Let them call it what they want, but how much is it at the end of the day? Right. And so the eyes kind of lit up, and I was like, perceived lower per square foot value, but higher square footage equals more money.
Right.
So we do things pretty simple.
So was this other provider just like cramming more climbing wall into the space, or how are they doubling the number?
That's what I asked them to go back and ask the other wall provider to kind of justify that. I didn't get an answer on that. I think they were just shooting a dart at the board there, but they did have a layout with heights listed.
Interesting.
So I don't know, but I think it maybe opened their eyes to like, okay, what's going on? There's something else going on here. So pay attention to the final dollar figure, not so much the square footage in the model. I pull mine just from the model, and if I have to add a little bit extra for some type of crazy features, we do, but it's pretty reasonable. But that just keeps the square footage of climbing terrain at a consistent. Anybody can pull it. It's not smoke and mirrors. So that's important. So I think it's something that not a lot of people do. They just go, oh, so and so is giving this at 70. Well, so and so's at 80. Oh, well, forget them. Well, hold on. The 80s might be more realistic and might be more accurate and actually cost you less money.
Right. Yeah. Your 70 may not include X, Y, and Z and is going to end up being 115 by the time all is said and done or whatever.
Yeah. I got a call a couple of years ago from an industry friend that was building the gym, and he's like, "Hey man, would you charge for like extra footers or just to make everything freestanding, or would you just add some extra steel?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, what are you asking?" He's like, "Well, this company I'm talking to, we're going to build with, says we need to re-pour all of this concrete to get their walls to stand up because they don't want to attach to our building." And I said, "Well, that's interesting. I would probably not tell you to do that unless it was absolutely necessary, and we'd look for ways to attach to the building."
Yeah, because now you're talking about excavation, you're talking about breaking up the slab, pouring reinforced footers. I've had to deal with that before.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to in certain places, in certain conditions, certain features of building, whatever. But just seemed really, really interesting. So that hopefully would be in their exclusions of concrete, support concrete or something like that. Make sure you get a full set of drawings to them if you have it. So your climbing wall providers are able to give you an accurate bid, even without seeing the space, a somewhat accurate bid if they do have a full set of architectural, structural, mechanical drawings. Things change. If it's existing, have them do a site visit. But if not, like that full set of drawings is really, really important for sure. So we can make sure there's no collisions or things where things are kind of running into one another.
And I'll note here, I'm sure you've experienced this as well, is make sure that it's an up-to-date set of drawings. There are a lot of times where the building has changed hands a few times and it's not the original owner anymore, and maybe some updates have been made along the way and there's a mezzanine, or they rearranged the HVAC ducting, or whatever it is, they built a new wall since,
Right.
the original drawings were submitted to the city or whatever. So when you're doing this, make sure it's which is probably why the site visit is super valuable, right? Because you walk in with the drawings and you're like,
Yeah.
that room's not there in these drawings, right? So, make sure that what you have is up to date.
Yeah, for sure. Super helpful. Um, Next thing also to look, well, two things really, like last couple of bullet points is make sure before you sign that contract that material escalation hasn't happened, the pricing's still
Yeah.
accurate, and you can lock into that pricing, or at least understand if there is escalation, what that number looks like, and be okay with that. I have seen where like, oh well, yeah, but you see here, material escalation is not included in our proposal, and
Mm.
now like
Are you
COVID
talking about like
times.
between the time I get a bid from somebody and when the contract comes in?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And it's like, okay, well, now a sheet of ply is $800, not 125.
right. Yeah.
So be smart, be careful, understand how long the proposal's good for as well.
Mm,
I've seen that
hmm.
happen. Oh, well, that proposal's not good, and we had a price hike.
Yeah.
So be smart on that. And anybody that's worth their weight should not be pulling that crap. But I have seen it happen. Um, and then, a big one that people think about is can the climbing wall company meet your project timeline? Things always shift, as you know, like always shift, right? They get longer. But
Yeah.
if they can't meet your timeline, there might be value in seeking other bids, because if that company can and you're paying, like, so they can't meet your timeline, you're paying rent for 3 or 4 months before the wall builder's there, and they've got a 2 month installation, and your rent's
Hmm.
35 grand a month. Holy cow, that's really expensive, right?
Yep.
And so if they can meet your timeline, there's great value to that. So just understand what that looks like and what their commitment to
What is the dollar value to being able to have your timeline met? Like there's for sure a dollar value there.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
there is. And again, maybe that $70 a square foot company doesn't meet your timeline, but the 80 does. Okay, well, what's that delta? If the scope's the same, is it still worth it to hire the 80 because you can get it done on your timeline, right? So there's value to
Yeah.
that. So ways to look at that. It's not always, again, that per square foot value. So definitely some stuff to think about on this end. I'm happy to send this stuff out to anybody that kind of wants it. Once you kind of get through all of this, the next logical big step is, and I'll stop sharing for this bit, but when do you pull the trigger and buy climbing walls, Gavin? What do you tell your clients?
I mean, there's a couple things, and I tell my clients the following, which is we talked earlier about how this is one of the biggest checks you're going to write. Again, assuming you're not, building a 30,000 square foot building or whatever. This is one of the biggest checks you're going to write. And it's also really critical to your business, right? Even if if the GC screws up your bathroom, that's a huge pain, but that's not like this sort of critical function to the business. And additionally, if something's wrong with the plumbing in your bathroom, there's probably 200 plumbers in your town that can come fix that stuff. If something gets screwed up with your climbing wall, like you can't just like call the local guy and be like, "Hey, come fix my climbing wall." You got to go back to Jared or, whoever it is. And now you're dealing with scheduling again. So I think pretty much everybody that's building climbing walls, they're all fine. Like I don't know that I've gotten on any climbing wall by all of the manufacturers that I'm sure we're all thinking about and been like, well, this is a completely terrible rock climbing wall.
Right,
They're
right.
all building fine walls. So the questions that come up for me when I'm talking to my clients is like, do you trust this person? Do you trust the numbers that you're seeing? Do you trust the timeline? Do you want to work with this person for the next 6 months to a year to get this thing done? And also like, do you feel like it's going to be a hassle, and do you feel like you're going to get the product that you were sold, right? Like those are some really key differentiating factors. The price is going to be the price. The problem is that I think some people are hiding the pricing a little more than others. Like some people are doing a little bit better at having transparent pricing. There's for sure a couple wall builders out there that are probably issuing sort of like change orders and like stuff kind of pops up along the way that is probably avoidable. So there's not like a right or wrong answer here, but at the end of the day, it's going to be partially about the what you're going to scroll down to the bottom of that PDF, and whatever that big bold number is at the bottom is of course going to be part of just the brass tacks of, does this align with the budget that I have, or the investors that I have, or the loan that I'm taking on. But you also have to consider all of the other things, right? Is this partner trustworthy? Are they going to show up on time? Is the product going to be good? Am I going to run into trouble? I always recommend that people call references. Don't ask the wall builder for references, by the way, because of course the wall builder is going to give you the last 3 projects that they did that went amazingly. They're not going to give you the one guy that they had problems with. So, if you're go find who's built some gyms for these people, and just call some of those owners, be like, hey, I'm thinking about using Gavin's climbing wall company. Like, you used them. What was that like? Was it good? Was it bad? That's where you're really going to get some good insight. And those are some of the things that I recommend to people, to ultimately take a bid that is a number and try and contextualize it inside of the larger picture of, like, not only is the number right, but is this all going to go well, right? I mean, no plan survives first contact in battle, but is this all going to go well? Because the number is just a number,
Yep.
which is your whole point, right? Which is like the PSF is like sort of not real, sort of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe that's our shirt for CWA next April.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
PSF is a lie.
PSF is a lie. Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I think it's, it's multifactorial, and on the flip side of that, I've talked to people about getting a number from wall builders as early as possible, so that when we're doing our work together to do financial modeling, we have something, right? And even if we're within 10 or 20%, that's good enough. And so, if we can get with some wall builders and they're like, yeah, reasonable placeholder right now is $80 a square foot or something like that, as long as it's believable, and I've got something I can put in a model and slide it up and down, and that's really helpful.
Yeah, and I think early on, get a couple of those numbers to start comparing and
Yeah,
contrasting.
totally. Yeah.
I think that's helpful,
Because especially if you get massively different numbers, right? If you call one person and they're like, yeah, it's $42 per square foot, and you call the next person and they say it's 80. It's like, how are you guys, like, you guys are for sure using basically the same materials. Like, how is it possible that it's double? Like, what's missing in the $40 that isn't in the 80?
Yeah, for sure. And there's 100 ways to play with those numbers, for sure. Yeah, I think this is great. I think just your knowledge and expertise, and being in it so long, and seeing these different bids, and going through head scratching builds and builds that go smoothly, and
Yeah.
all of that is obviously why you're great at what you do. And I think hopefully some folks have found some good information here, and
Yeah.
some resources and things like that. Again, hit us up if you want copies of what we kind of shared. Happy to send those out to you. If you've got a number from 2 different builders, I don't care if it's not me, and you ask me what's missing, and I'll be able to tell you. It's not rocket science. Maybe they just don't have their logistical cost rolled up in their per square foot. It could be something as simple as that, right? And
Yeah.
I've seen that played as well. So they get a really
Mhm.
low per square foot value, but they're missing a bunch still. So let us know how we can help. Gavin, thank you so much for joining Texture Talk episode 2. Tell the people
Sir,
how
always
they
a
can
pleasure.
find you.
Yeah, you can find me by going to riseaboveconsultancy.com. I'm on Instagram, at Rise Above Consulting. Yeah, come hunt me down and harass me, ask me a bunch of questions.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate the time and the conversation. Again, hit us up, jw@maverickclimbing.com, if you want a copy of any of the things we shared today, if it's helpful. Talk to your builders, get to know them. It's really important. Understand who they are, make sure they got your best interest at heart, and you'll thank yourself later. Trust me.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks again, everybody. Episode 3 coming up, I think later this month. It's actually on texture, wall texture and hole texture, and why they matter. I got Pete Jewell and maybe a mystery guest, but I got Pete Jewell, the man, is going to join us on that. So we'll see you on episode 3. Gavin, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you later on. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, bud.